The sun was mercilessly scorching the asphalt of Austin's downtown streets when the dispatcher relayed a call about a possible double homicide at the upscale Winecrest apartment complex. Detective Kimani Mbeki was just finishing his morning coffee at the police station when his partner, Sergeant Roy Wilkins, reported the emergency call. "Looks like we've got a serious case, Kimani. 2 bodies in a penthouse on Congress Avenue." Kimani grimaced and set aside his unfinished drink. It was going to be a long day. 30 minutes later, the detective was already parked outside the luxurious glass and concrete building. A small crowd of gawkers had gathered outside, held back by police tape. The elevator smoothly delivered Kimani to the 12th floor. Stepping out into the corridor, he immediately saw the bustle of forensics officers at the door, numbered 1206. A uniformed officer checked his badge and led him inside. "What do we have here?" Kimani asked, pulling on latex gloves. Medical examiner Janice Taylor stepped away from her work and nodded toward the living room. Male and female, both with gunshot wounds. Female shot in the heart, male shot in the head. Preliminary time of death between 22 and 2 in the morning. Kimani entered a spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooking the city center. On the snow-white carpet lay 2 bodies. A woman, looking about 25 to 27 years old, in a silk robe, sprawled near the coffee table. 2 meters away from her was the body of a middle-aged man in an expensive shirt and pants. "Preliminary picture?" Kimani asked, surveying the scene. "Judging from the position of the bodies and the nature of the wounds, she was killed first," Janice replied, pointing at the woman. The gun was found next to the man, 9mm, registered in his name. Victims' names? Lamar Fremont, 43 years old, owner of Fremont Motors, replied the officer who approached, looking at a notebook. "The apartment is registered to him. The woman is Nia Baggio, 27 years old. According to the concierge, a frequent visitor, but didn't live here permanently." Kimani walked slowly around the room, noting the rich furnishings, designer furniture, modern art on the walls, a bar with a collection of expensive liquor. "Who discovered the bodies?" "Concierge." Mr. Fremont didn't answer his phone, and then a worried friend called the front desk. Concierge used the master key and found them. The detective walked over to the woman's body. Nia Baggio was beautiful, smooth dark skin, long legs, perfect manicure. A diamond bracelet sparkled on her wrist. "Family?" "Fremont has a wife, Aaliyah. Lives in a mansion in the Westlake neighborhood. Already sent officers to notify her." "And the girl?" "Still looking into it. Preliminary reports say she's modeled for private shows and local brands." Kimani went to the window, looking out over the city. It was going to be a hot day, not just because of the Texas sun. "Any surveillance footage?" "The techs are already working on it. Preliminarily, the last visitor left the building at 21:30 yesterday." The detective returned to the bodies and noticed 2 nearly empty bottles of wine and 2 glasses on the coffee table. "Check them for prints and substance residue," he ordered. In the far corner of the living room was a piano with music sheets scattered on it. Next to it lay a smartphone in a pink case, probably belonging to Nia. Kimani made a mental note to have the technicians check its contents. Through the archway, he made his way to the bedroom. The huge bed was unmade, but the bedspread showed dents, as if someone had sat on it. There was a photograph on the bedside table. Fremont was hugging a beautiful woman about his age, probably his wife. On the dressing table were women's cosmetics, perfume, and a jewelry box. From the looks of it, Nia had spent enough time here to settle in. Back in the living room, Kimani noticed that the forensics team was already photographing footprints and collecting evidence. "Detective, take a look," Janice called out to him, pointing to something next to Fremont's body. A smartphone with a cracked screen lay next to the man's right arm. Janice, already wearing a new pair of gloves, carefully picked it up and pressed a button. The screen lit up, showing an open message. "Sent yesterday at 20 hours and 15 minutes, Janice noted. From one Jelani. "Lamar, we need to talk urgently. It's about Nia. Call me back." Kimani made a note in his notebook. "We need to find this Jelani and check all communications between them." By then, additional officers and technicians had arrived at the apartment. Kimani headed for the door where Sergeant Wilkins was interviewing the concierge, a short, nervous man in his 60s. "Mr. Kimani glanced at the name tag. "Patterson. How often did Ms. Baggio visit Mr. Fremont's apartment?" 3 or 4 times a week, mostly in the evening," the concierge replied, continuously adjusting his tie. "Mr. Fremont asked to always let her pass without calling. Did you notice anything unusual last night?" "Not that unusual," Patterson stammered. "Ms. Baggio came in around 7 p.m. She seemed upset. Mr. Fremont arrived about an hour later, not in the best of moods either." "And the visitors?" "No one after them. Although," Patterson furrowed his brow, "a friend of Mr. Fremont's came in around 9, Jelani Terrell. He's a frequent visitor, and he has a key. Didn't stay long, about 20 minutes. Did he talk to you before he left?" "Yeah, he came down and said goodbye. Said Mr. Fremont had decided to be alone with Miss Baggio. He looked worried." Kimani continued his tour of the apartment. In Mr. Fremont's office, he found a safe that had already been opened by a technician. Inside were documents, cash, and some jewelry. "Looks like nothing was stolen," one of the technicians said. "There's several $1,000s in cash." "Motive is not robbery," Kimani said thoughtfully. There was a laptop in the office, which the technicians were already packing for further examination. Next to it was a stack of papers, invoices, business contracts, bank statements. The detective was methodically going through the documents when an envelope with the logo of Austin Medical Center Clinic caught his eye. Carefully opening it, Kimani extracted a medical report dated last week. His eyes widened as he read the diagnosis: HIV positive. The patient's name was Lamar Fremont. At the bottom of the document, the doctor made a handwritten notation: "Patient informed to notify all sexual partners." Kimani carefully placed the document back into the envelope and called Sergeant Wilkins over. "Roy, we need to expand the investigation, and the first order of business is to find this Jelani Terrell." Exiting the office, Kimani took another look at the crime scene. The bodies were already being prepared for transportation to the morgue. It seemed like a typical story: rich man, young mistress, possibly a crime of passion. But the medical report added a whole new twist to the case. "Detective Mbeki," one of the officers called out to him. The concierge remembered something else. In the last 2 weeks, Mr. Fremont and Ms. Baggio had quarreled several times. He had heard loud voices when he passed by the apartments during his rounds. Kimani nodded, making another note in his notebook. Stepping out onto the penthouse balcony, he looked out at the sprawling Austin below, drenched in the midday sun. The city lived its life, unaware of the drama playing out on the 12th floor of this luxurious building. His phone rang. The call was from the station with information about Ni Baggio. Kimani listened, his eyebrows rising higher and higher. "Interesting," he said, ending the call. "Very interesting." Back in the apartment, he turned to Janice. "Check both victims for HIV status at autopsy, and run a full toxicology." Having completed the initial examination of the crime scene, Kimani went down to the lobby, where an agitated Patterson was still on duty. "Mr. Patterson, I need security footage and a complete list of Mr. Fremont's visitors over the last month." "Of course, Detective." One more thing. Do you know anything about Mr. Fremont's or Ms. Baggio's medical condition?" The concierge was visibly tense. "No, sir. I don't meddle in the personal affairs of tenants." "What about medical facilities? Maybe they had nurses come by, deliver medications?" "Mr. Fremont went to the clinic several times in the last 2 weeks. I called a cab for him." Kimani nodded and pulled out a business card. "If you think of anything else, call me anytime." Once outside, where several journalists, attracted by the police activity, had already gathered, Kimani put on his sunglasses and headed for his car. He was to inform Fremont's wife of her husband's death and begin to unravel the tangle. On the way to the station, Kimani pondered the medical report he had found. If Fremont had recently learned of his HIV-positive status, the question was, did Nia Baggio know about it? And if so, was she the source of the infection, or was she also a victim? Either way, this factor could have been a powerful motive for murder. The only question was who pulled the trigger and why both died. Detective Kimani Mbeki sat in his office, studying the information gathered on the victims of the double murder. 2 folders lay in front of him, one containing Lamar Fremont's files, the other Nia Baggio's. Preliminary autopsy results confirmed his suspicions. Both were HIV positive. What's more, the pathologist estimated that Nia had been infected significantly longer. Kimani leaned back in his chair, pondering his motives. If Nia was aware of her status and had deliberately exposed Lamar to the risk of infection, it could have been the cause of the conflict. But who pulled the trigger? There was a knock on the door. Sergeant Wilkins entered with a cup of coffee. "There's news," he said, sitting down on the edge of the table. "We've found Nia Baggio's girlfriend. Zaria Okafor works as a nurse at Riverside Health. Says they were close." "That's great. Bring her in for questioning." "And what about Jelani Terrell?" "We got an address and a place of employment. He's a manager at a car dealership in Fremont." "Good," Kimani nodded. "And Fremont's wife?" "Aaliyah Fremont has agreed to a meeting at their home. She is still in shock, but is willing to answer questions." 2 hours later, Detective Mbeki stopped his car in front of the Fremont's impressive mansion in the upscale Westlake neighborhood. The stone and glass house stood on a hill overlooking the lake. The manicured grounds and 3 premium cars in the driveway clearly demonstrated the financial status of the owners. The door was opened by a housekeeper who escorted Kimani into the spacious, high-ceilinged living room where Aaliyah Fremont was waiting for him. She sat on the sofa, elegant even in her grief, a slender woman with short, stylishly styled hair, wearing a simple but expensive black dress. "Mrs. Fremont, I'm Detective Kimani Mbeki. Please accept my condolences for your loss." Aaliyah nodded, gesturing for him to sit down. "When can I collect my husband's body?" she asked in a quiet but firm voice. "In the next few days," Kimani replied. "I need to ask some questions, if you are able to answer." "Of course. I want you to catch whoever did this. What can you tell me about your husband's relationship with Nia Baggio?" Aaliyah flinched slightly, but kept her composure. "I knew about her, Detective. There were certain, arrangements. Lamar didn't hide his affairs on the side." "And you were okay with that?" Kimani asked cautiously. "I was happy with our life," Aaliyah cut him off. 20 years of marriage, a common business, a certain status. Call it an agreement between adults." Kimani nodded understandingly. It was not uncommon in the world of the wealthy for spouses to turn a blind eye to extramarital affairs in order to preserve other advantages. "What do you know about your husband's health status?" Aaliyah tensed. "What do you mean?" "Your husband recently found out that he has HIV," Kimani said bluntly, watching her reaction carefully. A shadow flashed across Aaliyah's face, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Yes, he told me 2 weeks ago. We hadn't been close in years, so I wasn't at risk." "Did he say how he was infected?" "He was sure it was this girl, Nia, who infected him. He was furious. Was going to..." She hesitated. "What was he going to do?" Aaliyah looked away. "Sue her. My husband is not the type to forgive betrayal, Detective." "Where were you the night before last, between 20 and 2 in the morning?" "Here at home, with my daughter. She's home from college for the weekend." "Can anyone confirm that?" "Our housekeeper and driver. And the security guard at the entrance to the compound. I never left the house." Kimani made a note in his notebook. "What do you know about Jelani Terrell?" At the mention of that name, Aaliyah visibly tensed. "Jelani? Lamar's close friend. They grew up together, started a business together. Lamar trusted him like no one else." "Have you been in contact with him?" "He's a frequent visitor to our house." "He was." she corrected herself. Almost like family. When was the last time you saw him? About 3 days ago. He came to discuss some car dealership business with Lamar. Kimani noticed the strange expression on her face at the mention of Jelani. There was definitely more to it, but he decided not to press it yet. Have you noticed anything unusual in your husband's behavior in the last few days? Aaliyah wondered. He was irritable, depressed, but I attributed it to the diagnosis. That kind of news would throw anyone off balance. After a few more questions, Kimani left the Fremont mansion, convinced that Aaliyah wasn't telling him the truth. But whether it was about the murder or some other secret of their family life remained to be seen. Waiting for him at the police station was Zaria Okafor. Unlike the refined Aliyu, Zaria was a full-figured woman with kind eyes and a distrustful gaze. She was nervously rubbing the strap of her purse as Kimani entered the interrogation room. Ms. Okafor, thank you for agreeing to talk, the detective began, taking a seat across from her. I still can't believe Nia is dead, Zaria said in a trembling voice. Who would do such a thing? We're looking into it. Tell me, how long did you know Nia? Almost 5 years. We met at the gym. She was so, vibrant, lively. How close was your relationship? We were like sisters. At least I thought we were. Zaria sounded bitter. In the last year, we've drifted apart, after she started dating Fremont. What do you know about their relationship? Zaria wrinkled her nose. He was her sponsor. That's what she called it. Paid for her apartment, bought her clothes, jewelry, in exchange for, you know. Kimani nodded. Classic scheme. You work as a nurse, right? He asked, changing the direction of the conversation. Yes, at Riverside Health. The same clinic where Nia was tested for HIV? Zaria straightened abruptly, her eyes widening in surprise. You know about this? Ms. Okafor, this is murder. We are looking into every aspect of the victims' lives. Zaria took a deep breath. Yes. Nia found out about her diagnosis about 8 months ago. Yeah, I helped her organize the test when she complained of strange symptoms. And then what happened? She was in shock, of course. We both were. I insisted she tell all her partners, including Fremont. Did she do that? Zaria lowered her eyes. No. Said she couldn't risk losing him and the money he was giving her. She was on medication to reduce her viral load and thought the risk of transmission was minimal. But that's not enough, Kimani noted, especially without informing her partner. I told her the same thing, Zaria exclaimed fervently. I begged her to tell him. It's a crime to deliberately expose someone to the risk of infection. But she wouldn't listen, and we had a fight. A big fight. When was this? About 3 months ago. We haven't talked much since. When was the last time you saw Nia? Zaria thought about it. About 2 weeks ago. She came to my house late at night in tears. Said Fremont suspected something, asking questions about her health. And what did you advise her to do? To tell the truth. But I doubt she listened. After talking to Zaria, the picture started to become clearer. Nia knew about her diagnosis, but kept it from Fremont. He, in turn, had recently learned he was infected and was probably guessing at the source. Next on the list was Jelani Terrell. Kimani found him at the main Fremont Motors dealership, a modern glass and chrome building on the outskirts of Austin. Jelani appeared to be a tall, well-dressed man in his 40s, with a short haircut and attentive eyes. He met the detective in his office, littered with papers and car catalogs. A terrible tragedy, Jelani said, motioning Kimani to sit down. I still can't believe Lamar is dead. Were you close? The detective asked, noting Jelani's red eyes and crumpled appearance. It was obvious that the news of his friend's death had shaken him badly. Like brothers. We grew up in the same neighborhood, worked our way up together. Everything I have because of Lamar. Did you know Nia Baggio? Jelani was visibly tense. Yeah, she was, a friend of Lamar's. Just a friend? We all knew their relationship, Jelani shrugged. Lamar always had a weakness for beautiful women. Were you in Fremont's apartment the night of the murder? Jelani swallowed. Yeah, I stopped by around 9. Lamar called, said he needed to talk. About what? He was, upset. He'd recently found out he was HIV positive. And how did you react? I was as shocked as he was. Lamar was convinced that Nia had infected him. He was planning on, to end his relationship with her. Kamani noticed Jelani avoiding a direct look, rubbing the watch on his wrist. Break off the relationship or something else? What do you mean? Mr. Fremont was a man of serious resources and influence. Once he learned that a woman had deliberately put him at such risk, he could plan more serious action. Jelani was silent for a few seconds, then sighed. He was talking about the trial, about making the incident public, embarrassing her, maybe even getting her prosecuted for intentionally spreading HIV. Did you support that idea? Yeah, I tried to reassure him. Told him that a public scandal wasn't in his best interest. It would affect his reputation, his business. And what did he decide? I don't know. When I left, he was still furious. Nia had arrived by then, so it was just the two of them. What state was Nia in? Scared. I think she guessed what he had found out. Kamani scrutinized Jelani. Something about his behavior seemed unnatural, like he was trying to control every word, every gesture. Mr. Terrell, where were you between 22 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning? At home. Alone. Can anyone confirm that? No, I live alone. Jelani met his gaze. You don't think I... Standard procedure, Kamani replied. We check everyone close to the victims. After talking to Jelani, the detective returned to the station and requested a search warrant for his home and access to his phone records. Something in his story didn't add up. That evening, Kimani reviewed the results of the search of Fremont's apartment. The technicians had found a search history on his laptop regarding Texas state laws on intentional exposure to HIV, as well as information on attorneys who specialized in such cases. But the most important find turned out to be a draft of a statement prepared for filing with police, where Fremont accused Nia Baggio of willfully contracting the dangerous disease. The document had been saved the day before the murder, but never sent. In a desk drawer, detectives also found printouts of correspondence with Nia over the past month. The tone of the messages gradually changed from gentle to suspicious, then to outright hostile. In the last message, sent 3 days before the murder, Fremont wrote, "I know the truth. You will pay for it." Kamani tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. A motive was beginning to emerge. Fremont had learned of his diagnosis and the fact that Nia was hiding her HIV status. He planned revenge, perhaps publicly shaming her and getting her prosecuted. But who pulled the trigger? Nia, defending herself from threats? Fremont himself, determined to take his own life after killing the girl who betrayed him? Or a third person with motives of his own? The answer may have been hiding in the phone records and surveillance cameras that were just beginning to be analyzed. At that moment, there was a knock on the office. A young female officer entered with a folder in her hands. "Detective Mbeki, you need to see this. We ran Fremont's financial transactions over the last month. 3 days ago, he made a large cash withdrawal from his account. And we also found photos on his cell phone that he's been sneaking. Photos of Nia entering some building." Kamani opened the file. The pictures were of Nia entering Riverside Health, the same clinic where Zaria worked. "It looks like Mr. Fremont was gathering evidence against Ms. Baggio," Kimani said, "and was preparing for some drastic action." Detective Kimani Mbeki's office was a creative mess. The walls were hung with crime scene photos, pictures of the victims, and a timeline of events. A whiteboard displayed the names of key players in the case, connected by colored lines indicating the connections between them. As the third day of the double murder investigation drew to a close, Kamani sensed that the clue was close at hand. He methodically went through the collected evidence, building a sequence of events in his head Nia Baggio learned of her HIV status 8 months ago, but decided to hide the diagnosis from Lamar Fremont for fear of losing his financial support. Fremont learned of her infection 2 weeks ago and began to suspect Nia. He collected evidence, planned a public exposure, and even a criminal prosecution. Everything pointed to a typical crime of passion. Fremont killed Nia and then shot himself. But something was keeping Kimani on edge. Intuition, honed by years of work, told him the picture was incomplete. There was a knock at the door. Sergeant Wilkins entered with a plastic cup of coffee and a folder of documents. "Fingerprint and DNA results from the crime scene," he said, holding out the folder. Kimani flipped through the pages quickly, reading the technical details. Suddenly, a paragraph caught his attention, and he reread it several times, making sure he understood it correctly. "Roy, look." He pointed to a line in the report. On the handle of the gun, in addition to Fremont's prints, there were partial prints of another man. Incomplete, but enough to identify them. "Do they match anyone in the database?" "No, but we can compare them to our suspects." Kimani leaned back in his chair, thinking. If someone else's prints were on the gun, that means someone could have staged a murder-suicide. "Where are we on the security footage?" "Technicians are still analyzing," Wilkins replied. "But there's something interesting in Jelani Terrell's phone records." He held out another document. Kimani scrutinized the printout of calls and messages. "Look at this," he said thoughtfully. Jelani had called Nia 16 times in the last month, and most of the calls were after 11 in the evening. Strange for a mere friend of her lover, don't you think? Kimani nodded, then shifted his gaze to another report, analyzing the geolocation from Jelani's phone. And this is even more interesting. Over the past 2 weeks, Jelani had been near Nia's house several times, and it wasn't on his way to work or home. Surveillance? Looks like it. Kimani rubbed his chin. "Roy, let's check one more thing. Get a warrant for Jelani's bank accounts. I want to know if he's bought anything unusual lately." An hour later, Kimani stood in front of his board, adding new information. A picture was starting to emerge. Jelani Terrell, Lamar Fremont's closest friend, was taking a clear interest in Nia. Secret calls, surveillance. Perhaps his feelings for the girl were stronger than he recognized. Kimani's phone rang. It was one of the officers reviewing the surveillance footage. "Detective, we found something strange. According to the concierge, Jelani Terrell left the building at 9:20, but the parking lot camera footage shows his car staying there until 11:45. "He lied," Kimani whispered. "He didn't leave after 9. "There's something else," the officer continued. "We checked the cameras of the neighboring buildings. At 11:52, his car comes into the lens at an intersection 6 blocks from the Fremont apartments." "Good work. Send me everything you got." Kimani hung up the phone and turned to Wilkins. Jelani lied about his alibi. He stayed in the building much longer than he claimed. "You think he's our guy?" "Let's check his house again and get his prints to match the prints we found on the gun." The next morning, Kimani and Wilkins stood in front of the door of Jelani Terrell's modest East Austin home with a search warrant. Jelani had not shown up for work, and his cell phone was disconnected, troubling signs. Inside the house was orderly, but in one of the rooms set up as an office, detectives found something odd: a wall completely covered with photos of Nia Baggio. Dozens of pictures taken surreptitiously in different places: outside her house, at the mall, in a cafe. In some of the photos, she was with Fremont. "It's like an obsession," Wilkins muttered, looking through the collection. Kimani found a leather-bound diary in a desk drawer. Flipping through it, he found dozens of entries about Nia, where Jelani had seen her, what she was wearing, who she was talking to, and plenty of dark reflections on her relationship with Fremont. "She deserves better. She doesn't see his real face. One day she'll realize I'm the only one who truly cares for her." "Bingo," Kimani said quietly. "Our friend Jelani was secretly in love with his best friend's girlfriend. In the bedroom, under the mattress, They found a pair of latex gloves and a box of bullets matching those used in the murder. And in the pockets of a jacket hanging in the hallway, they found the keys to Fremont's apartment. "Where is he now?" Wilkins asked. If he realized we suspected him, he could have fled the state. "Put out a bolo and check all transportation hubs, airports, bus stations." Back at the station, Kamani was confronted with news. Forensics confirmed that the partial prints on the gun belonged to Jelani Terrell. They now had all the evidence they needed to make an arrest. But where to look for the suspect? Kamani pondered, going over everything he knew about Jelani. If he was truly obsessed with Nia, perhaps he felt the need to be near places associated with her. "Roy, check the cemetery where Nia is supposed to be buried tomorrow, and her mother's grave. She's buried in Austin's East Cemetery." 2 hours later, we got a report from a patrol car. Jelani Terrell was found in the cemetery sitting by the freshly dug grave meant for Nia Baggio. He offered no resistance when apprehended, seemed detached, and mumbled something about justice. In the interrogation room, Jelani looked broken. Dark circles under his eyes, faded eyes. He was no longer the confident manager Kimani had met at the car dealership. "Mr. Terrell, we found your fingerprints on the gun that killed Lamar Fremont and Nia Baggio," Kimani began, sitting down across from him. "We also have surveillance footage showing that you lied about the time you left the building." Jelani looked up but said nothing. "In your house, we found pictures of Nia, a diary with entries about her, and ammunition matching the ammunition used in the murder. Anything you want to explain?" "She was supposed to be mine," Jelani said quietly. "What happened that night?" Jelani took a deep breath and began to speak. "I loved her at first sight. When Lamar introduced us, I felt like the whole world stopped. She was perfect, but she chose him, always chose the money." "Did you follow her?" "Yeah, kept an eye on her. Lamar didn't deserve her. He used her like all the other women. And I would have made her happy." "What happened when Lamar found out about his diagnosis?" Jelani's eyes filled with tears. "He was furious, called me, told me everything. I couldn't believe Nia would do something like that. I went to him to talk to him. He showed me the test results, the evidence he'd gathered against her. Planned to ruin her life, embarrass her. So vindictive. Even in this situation, he was only thinking about himself." "And you decided to stop him?" "I decided to talk to Nia. When Lamar went into the other room, I sent her a message. Asked her to come in early. I wanted to warn her, give her a chance." Jelani was silent, as if reliving those events all over again. "What happened then?" "I pretended to leave, but I stayed in the building. Used the emergency staircase to get back to his floor. I had a key. He'd always trusted me." Jelani grinned bitterly. "I heard them screaming. Lamar was accusing her, threatening to destroy her. She cried, begged, said she loved him. She did, after everything she'd done." Jelani's voice trembled. "When I came in, they didn't even notice at first. Lamar was holding her hands, shaking her. I yelled for him to let her go. They both turned around, surprised. I told Nia that I knew the truth about her diagnosis, about her knowingly infecting my friend." "What about her?" "She laughed, said it didn't matter, that Lamar could buy dozens of people like her, and people like me too. Said she'd never look at me, even if I was rich like Lamar." Jelani clenched his fists. "I didn't plan to kill, I swear. Lamar had a gun in his office. I knew where he kept it. I just took it, for protection. I thought I could stop them. But when she said it, when she looked at me with such contempt..." Jelani lowered his head. "I fired. Once." She went down. Lamar lunged at me, tried to take the gun away. We struggled, and that's when the second shot rang out. "You staged Lamar's suicide," Kamani stated. "I panicked. I put the gun in his hand, wiped off everything I touched. But I wasn't wearing gloves the whole time. I must have made a mistake somewhere." "Why didn't you run out of town?" Jelani looked up at Kamani with tired eyes. "Where would I run to?" It's over. I lost my best friend. I lost the woman I loved. I thought I was saving Lamar from shame, avenging him, and for me, for rejecting her. But now I just want it to be over. Kimani stared at the man in front of him in silence. Love turned into obsession, friendship that turned into betrayal, and at the center of it all, a deadly disease that became the catalyst for tragedy. Jelani Terrell, you're under arrest for the murders of Nia Baggio and Lamar Fremont. As Wilkins led Jelani away, Kimani remained in the room, poring over notes. The case was closed, the killer confessed. But the detective was not relieved. There were no real winners in this story, only victims of their own passions and mistakes. In the evening, Kimani sat in his office, filling out the final paperwork on the case. The television in the corner was showing the local news, where a reporter was broadcasting about a tragedy in Austin's high society. The camera snapped to the face of Aaliyah Fremont, a widow coming out of her husband's funeral. Her face was impenetrable behind a dark veil. Roy Wilkins entered with 2 cups of coffee and held one out to Kimani. "You know, I keep thinking," the sergeant said, taking a seat on the edge of the table. "If Nia had just told Fremont about her diagnosis from the beginning, if Fremont hadn't cheated on his wife, if Jelani had confessed his feelings to Nia instead of watching her from the shadows." Kimani shook his head. Too many ifs, and in the end, 2 deaths and a broken life. He took a sip of coffee, looking at the evening lights of Austin outside the window. Somewhere out there, people were living their ordinary lives, unaware of the dark passions simmering behind closed doors. Damn it, Roy. Sometimes I wonder, do we really know the people we think we're close to? Or do we only see what they want to show us? Wilkins shrugged. Philosophical question, partner. I'm not sure I have an answer to it. Kimani closed the case file. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new investigation, new victims and perpetrators, an endless cycle of human tragedy that he tried to unravel day after day. "Do you know what the saddest thing about this case is?" Kimani asked, standing up and putting on his jacket. "That they were all looking for the same thing in their own way: love, acceptance, recognition, and each chose the most destructive path to get there." "It's human nature," Wilkins replied. "We're always complicating simple things."